President of the French Republic and invite him to address the Assembly. You have the floor, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, ministers, ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors, friends. We are here at this General Assembly when at a time when the Secretary General has chosen such an extremely important topic, the climate, as our central topic, which we discussed yesterday. And we're seeing more and more impatience everywhere. And we're seeing more and more around the world that many things can lead us to feel pessimistic. We are not meeting the challenge. The demands that we have set for ourselves, the goals that we have set for ourselves in the area of global warming or the combat to protect biodiversity. There are many tensions around the world. The level is unprecedented. Just when we see what just happened in the Gulf a few days ago, the Persian Gulf, or when we see the challenges that many of our friends in the Sahel are facing, and I see many friendly faces here that I know from other regions of the world. These conflicts are increasingly more complex and cruel against the civilians, against humanitarian personnel, against rights defenders. As David Miliband said, it's the age of impunity that has opened. Trade tensions are increasing. Increasingly, they're increasing worries about technological change and its impact. I don't want to draw a picture that is extremely pessimistic, and I know that you're tired of listening to speeches since this morning. I don't want to despair. However, we have everything to meet these challenges, everything, and in an unprecedented way. First of all, we have the knowledge. Never has science around the world been so abundant to meet the challenges that we have, and to see the means of meeting these challenges. Everything we're developing in technology, every year we have the knowledge in detail. We have the funding. There's no lack of funding around the world. We have the capacity to innovate that is unequal, and which is on a number of topics is also a way of dealing with these challenges. We have means of combating poverty to deal with many of the changes that I just mentioned. We have an awareness, a deep awareness of these problems of the modern world. Our young people, and also our public opinions are better informed and aware than ever before. And we have a framework here. Even a framework, an organization of free states that is ready to work together to deal with the challenges and prepare for the future. We have, as we call it, a framework for multilateralism, whether it's regional multilateralism or to deal with specific issues. Specialized organizations. So what are we lacking? Why do we keep pronouncing speeches and keep giving our people the illusion that we can't seem to be doing anything about it? Well, speaking here before you, I remembered a text that often has given me sustenance, and that Solzhenitsyn, in fact, wrote in 1968 on the decline of courage. That is what is missing. That is what we're lacking, is courage. A lot of courage, and enough, often enough. And here I would simply like to say that the appeal that I would like to make to you would be for us to bring back courage on two subjects just to start. The courage to start building peace, and the courage to act responsibly, to take responsibility. The courage, first of all, to build peace, because you need peace, you need courage for that. Because each time to build peace is taking a risk. It means not simply defending your own narrow interests or positions that sometimes have led to escalation of tensions around in every region of the world. Building peace is to take a risk, the risk of engaging in dialogue, making a compromise, to rebuilding trust. And in so many regions, that is what we need. It's what the Middle East today needs. In the region of the Gulf, that the region needs it. The courage, it means not simply provocations or reprisals. No, it's a responsible action followed by transparency. From the first time when I spoke at this General Assembly, I shared my convictions on the Iranian issue. I said that the strategy of pressure on the Iranian nuclear program could only lead to an increase in tensions in the region, unless there was a clear prospect for diplomatic solution. In 2018, after the American withdrawal from the Vienna Agreement of 2015, I proposed a global framework making it possible to preserve the JCPOA and to complement it with a more expanded approach dealing with issues raised by the Iranian nuclear program after 2025, also the role of Iran in regional crises and its ballistic programs. Well, what do we have today? Well, the American strategy and the European, Russian, and European determination to preserve the 2015 agreement, to these, Iran has responded by a strategy of maximum pressure on its regional environment and its neighbors. In this context, the growth in tensions that we've seen over the past few months has been constant. The attacks on the 14th of September against Saudi Arabia have clearly changed the situation. And so, bearing that in mind, today we have a risk of a serious conflict based on a miscalculation or a disproportionate response. Peace is at the mercy of an incident, of a miscalculation, and the consequences for the region would be very serious. Too serious for us to live on the edge of a cliff. So what should we do? Well, more than ever, I very sincerely and profoundly believe that the time has come to resume negotiations between the United States of America, Iran, the signatories of the JCPOA, and the countries of the region, which are first and foremost affected by the security and stability of. So what should be the conditions, the terms, and the goal, the targets of these negotiations? First of all, the certainty that Iran never acquire or develop nuclear weapons. Secondly, a solution to a crisis in Yemen. Thirdly, a regional security plan, which also incorporates the other crises of the region and security of maritime navigation. And finally, a lifting of economic sanctions. I'm not naive at all, and I don't believe in miracles. I believe that it takes courage to build peace. And that is why it's important for the United States, Iran, and the signatories of this agreement to show this courage. It is with the same conviction that we will continue our work that we've discussed at length over these weeks and during the G7 summit in Biarritz on Syria, on Libya, on the Sahel. Now, with regard to Syria, I want to salute the encouraging announcement made by the Special Representative of the Secretary General yesterday, and a decisive step forward. And finally, establishing the constitutional committee that has been so long awaited. We also looking at the humanitarian situation at Idlib. We need to be vigilant and of Syria in all its regions, and they need to protect all its people. And we will continue working to build an inclusive, lasting political solution in Syria. This will demand the work of this constitutional committee. It will also require securing Syrian territory to allow voluntary and safe return of refugees. It will also require a free electoral process, which will enable all Syrian citizens to take part. On Libya, the G7 summit recalled our goals and convictions. I very deeply believe that today we need an inter-Libyan reconciliation conference and a strong commitment of the African Union to working together with the United Nations to achieve this. Many initiatives have been taken, and I welcome the engagement of Germany. I welcome the engagement of all the stakeholders who want to build peace, but a lasting peace. A lasting peace will only be built on the basis of an inter-Libyan reconciliation. In the Sahel, you know how committed France is there. We've always been committed, and we've reaffirmed it. And there, the future lies in building lasting cooperation in the region among the 5 member states of the G5 Sahel. The engagement of our armed forces, the involvement of the United Nations, and the need we have to change the mandate of MINUSMA and to fully incorporate our goals, combating terrorism, lasting security in the Sahel, to incorporate those in the mission that we have set for ourselves, to move MINUSMA under Chapter 7, to continue involving all the armed forces of the region, re-engage all the security forces in the region in this combat against terrorism, and commit our energies into development and stabilization. This is essential. These are just some of the situations where dialogue, where political solution are keys to success. Again, this courage that it requires to build peace. It's what we have seen for the past few months in Sudan, and we didn't even suspect it. Thanks to the force of the Sudanese people, thanks to the capacity for dialogue between the army and the people, thanks to the work, once again, of the African Union, and thanks to the role of Ethiopia. And I want to, in particular, congratulate Ethiopia and the region as a whole for its clairvoyance, for its courage to build peace that is required today in Ukraine. President Zelensky has taken the first steps. President Putin has responded in kind. The progress over the past few weeks have been made. And here we know, again, what should be the next steps. We have the Minsk Agreement. And we should be able to build a lasting peace by working on the ground. In the next few weeks, we will have the Normandy format summit heads of state and government. On each one of these topics, the same question is asked of us: how to create an effective framework of cooperation between states. And I believe it's possible. I don't believe that the problems that we are facing can be resolved by diluting responsibilities, or a kind of seeing a globalization that disregards our peoples, our nations. And I go back to what President Trump said this morning. And I don't believe that the crises that we're experiencing can be resolved by turning inward, by isolationism. I truly believe in patriotism. but a patriotism that combines a love of one's nation and at the same time a universal vocation. I truly believe in sovereignty, a sovereignty that ensures autonomy and independence for oneself, and also conjugates it with the need to cooperate. What we need today is to reinvent what I defined, or what I called as strong multilateralism, as in my last statement to you. Not in this kind of old and a multilateralism that has been repeated ad infinitum, but rather a multilateralism based on real cooperation that strives to produce concrete results. We have demonstrated the effectiveness of this contemporary strong multilateralism. We showed it on the climate, and after the decision by the United States to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, together with the UN and the World Bank, we had the One Planet Summit. It made it possible to involve other actors, other stakeholders, other sources of funding. We saw that yesterday at the Climate Action Summit. By involving new actors, by launching a new momentum, we've demonstrated. And yesterday, the ratification by Russia of this same agreement is, I think, a demonstration of success of this approach. And the coalitions that were formed on various topics are further proof of this. It's the same pragmatic multilateralism that we have used to combat terrorism around the world during the Aqaba process, the Christchurch appeal in Paris. And I welcome the commitment of the King of Jordan and the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Yesterday, some 50 countries joined the initiative. There are platforms that have been set up to take concrete action. And I think we will go even further. But we have a concrete and true response, effective response to this. And we need to continue. We need to continue this momentum, this capacity of innovating to respond to modern challenges. And my Partnership for Democracy is also part of this. We need to be inventive. We need to be original in terms of security. The major challenge for us today is that we are no longer capable of ensuring stability in a world that's increasingly conflictual after leaving a two-polar world that in which we lived for many, many decades. So now we have a new order that's replaced the previous one. And we are trying in this new order to resolve problems effectively. And I truly believe that the courage to build peace requires reaffirming our values, values of human rights and the dignity of a human being, which cannot be the subject of any relativism. It requires recommitting to these values in all these situations which I managed to which I mentioned, to build peace and stability, and to offer people concrete solutions. Now, the next type of courage is to assume responsibility. Now, when we speak of all these challenges, when we speak of the common good, when we speak of the climate, education, inequalities, we can say that we know a lot. We see so much. We have every single expert is telling us in great detail about the situation of our world today. If we find ourselves weaker today, it's because too often we have challenged the truth, challenged facts to give preference to the short-term interests, sometimes give preference to narrow interests. And this has led to a loss of faith, and that is a fact. Inequalities today have increased once again in the world, among countries, within countries. Our contemporary capitalism is dysfunctional. It has produced a level of inequalities that is unprecedented. We are no longer capable of dealing with the new forms of poverty and inequality. It's a lack of equality of opportunities, inequality, gender inequality, inequality between regions, inequality in access to health, climate inequality. When we speak of the most vulnerable countries or the poorest regions who have been affected even more by global warming or a reduction in biodiversity. On all these topics, last year, I presented an agenda proposed for the G7 and the determination to put combat against inequalities at the very heart of that agenda. I just wanted to report to you on it very briefly. I think that this is a collective contribution that we can make on this so that a response begins to emerge for us to accompany the collective engagement that we saw on the SDGs. It's to move away from the short-term thinking and to try to make systemic changes. We committed collectively, first of all, to have a very assertive agenda for Africa, for the Sahel, for its security, stability, development, and more broadly, to have a true security, development, and reciprocity agenda with Africa. It's against this backdrop that next June we will have an Africa-France summit based on partnership and the involvement of civil society in this process. Next, it's an agenda that puts gender equality at the center. In Biarritz, we launched an initiative of some 250 million euros to support women entrepreneurs in Africa. And we will make sure that this project is quickly implemented. It's an initiative that is initiated by African women, operated by African development banks, and for which the major economic powers have decided to invest in it in order to support it. We supported the fund of Dr. Muguwe to protect the victims of sexual violence, launched the Global Partnership for Equalities that we have expanded during this General Assembly. It consists for states who choose to join it, to take at least one national measure for the benefit of women by using best practices around the world. This combat for equality between men and women is essential because we haven't even won that fight in our own societies. The killing of women continues in France, just as in so many other states. We must define a legal status for this, define it as a crime, and take steps to eradicate it, even more than we have done so far. Because we see in so many states, we see backsliding of equality between men and women. We see women's rights to dispose of their bodies challenged everywhere. Where we see inequalities between men and women become a fact, it's a step backwards for civilization. It's terrorism that wins. It's backwardness that wins. It's a step back for education and for growth. It's step back for economic growth, because it is to deprive countries of the potential for economic growth and richness. That is why we strongly support the United Nations on this agenda. Three principles of action: emancipate, protect, and ensure true equality. We have taken steps with a view towards the forum generation equality that will take place in Paris in 2020, 25 years after the Beijing Declaration, which marked the history of our organization at the time. 25 years later, it is there can be no question of backsliding or taking a step back. We need to move forward. Now, this battle and this courage to assume responsibility is also something that we need to think of when we talk of healthcare. And here, too, we are seeing too much backsliding, too many steps back, too much difficulty in accessing healthcare in too many regions of the world. Even today, in spite of the efforts, on the 10th of October, in Lyon, there will be a conference to reconstitute the fund to combat AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria. It is at this tribune in 2002, Kofi Annan called on the establishment of a fund to combat inequality in the face of combating mortal diseases. And that was achieved with the help of the G8. Over 30 million lives have been saved thanks to this fund. We are on the verge of eliminating major pandemics, and in the next few years we might be able to save 16 million people more. It's simply to state that it is inconceivable that for financial reasons or unequal access, there can be no question that people shouldn't be able to have access to treatments to prevent or to cure a specific disease, or to prevent these diseases from spreading again. It's inconceivable. This is why in Lyon we need $14 billion. We have 3 more weeks, and we are going to work as hard as possible to make sure that this global fund is reconstituted and enables us to meet our ambitions. Now, lastly, on the climate, because here again we need to fight against inequality. And is one of the topics on which the courage of assuming responsibility must be demonstrated. Basically, there's a constant paradox on climate, and we're collectively kind of becoming jaded to it. We've established a framework. We give our young people the possibility of speaking their minds, and we tell them it's great to hear what you have to say to us, and at the same time we keep acting just as we have in the past without changing things. That cannot continue. And I want to say that with regard to the combat against climate change and loss of biodiversity, we need to take concrete steps. We need to change our collective approach. We need to strive to change the way we act together with our entire society's investors.
First of all, we need to focus on our ambitions. This is crucial if we want to seek to bring the temperature increase below 2 degrees Celsius. In 2020, we need to area in particular of carbon tax with a real minimum price, with taxes, and this is absolutely crucial. We need to focus on this agenda. These courageous decisions are important, and they need to be taken right now. We need more broadly to involve all countries in focusing on being carbon neutral by 2050. President Pinera just talked a few moments ago to you, and he talked about this. We need to continue to work on this crucial strategy. India has just said that it is prepared to get on board with this agenda, this coalition. And I know that China is very keen to focus on climate. It has done so over the past few years. I know that together, if we focus on carbon neutrality, we meet our objectives to this end. The COP25 in Chile and then the COP26 that will take place in Europe will be decisive events. The second thing is to bring together our agendas and our actions. And this is what I said yesterday. We cannot say, well, we're doing everything brilliantly, it's absolutely fine, and at the same time continue to depend on coal in so many countries. It is crucial that each and every country, with the assistance of the international community, with good financing and respecting all the different components of our society and understanding their limitations, of course, but it is important that each country move on from coal. And then it is crucial that the major countries of this world stop financing new polluting facilities in developing countries. Today, we are continuing to export financing, and there are so many projects in developing countries financed by developed countries that open up new polluting structures. And in a way, we're saying to developing countries, we're saying to the poorest countries, you will, it's all right in your country. That is inconsistent. That is irresponsible. Let us be clear. We need to involve all of our development banks, as we sought to do on Sunday, by refocusing financing onto sustainable development everywhere in Asia, in Africa, on the American continent, in the Pacific. The future of energy production is also to move on from coal and to no longer depend on this. In the same way, there is a need for us to build a climate fund that really is meets these challenges. Now, in a few weeks' time, there is going to be the reconstitution in Paris of the Climate Fund, and I would urge our major partners here to provide crucial financing. There are many countries, including ourselves, that have doubled our inputs. Please do take that commitment. It will be decisive. And on this topic of consistency, as I said yesterday, we can no longer have free exchange. But I don't think that this must be unreasonable. It must be reasonable. It must include the carbon neutral, carbon zero focused and zero deforestation. So at each and every stage, we must find compensation measures, but we can't force some countries to make efforts and continue to trade with those who don't do so. We can't continue to make statements from this podium and continue to import those products that run against this at the very same time. It's not going to change overnight. France itself too often imports products that lead to deforestation. And that involves changes, deep-rooted changes. It involves partnerships and strategies with the countries of origin, with our businesses, with our finances. I'm not saying to you that everything's fine in France and we've done everything absolutely fantastically. No, far from it. But however, if collectively we are not transparent, we are not responsible, and if we do not insist on being consistent between our words and action, and if we do not marry up climate and trade, then we are never, ever going to achieve it. It is going to in forests and the African forests. So the reserve of primary forests of our planet. We have countries who have taken commitments, and France has underscored that. I would like to underscore Germany and Norway's commitments. There are major countries, there are international organizations, there are NGOs, and there are most countries affected by by the Amazon as well. I don't want to go into more detail there. May all those who wish to join, join. But we need to move forward. We need to make progress. And by the Santiago COP meeting, we are going to ensure that we can invest closer to the ground. We'll be pragmatic again. To promote products that promote reforestation and all of these different projects to help the Amazon and the African forest, including the Congo Basin, that help to preserve the forest, are absolutely crucial. Our combat is to combat destruction of biodiversity. We are seeking biodiversity, and there are challenges there. There are major events. There is the key Congress in France in 2020 and the COP in Beijing in 2020 as well. We need to have clear acts taken by 2020. On the oceans now, we are absolutely struck by the recent report of the IPCC. It is absolutely devastating. We are currently losing the battle. In Biarritz, we started to build coalitions with major transport countries who are seeking to reduce the speed of things. And that is just the start. We are very far from winning. Now, I've talked to you about what we were doing for the primary forests. And here I want to talk about the oceans now. We're taking specific actions, and we need to do so in order to win the battle. We're talking about initial change, initial actiontation. But I want to say very forcefully here, what we are trying to do collectively is crucial. We are collectively trying to change our collective organizations, political, economic, and social ones, to reduce inequalities and even better still, to prevent them. I don't believe that the right response to contemporary growing inequalities in the area of climate and healthcare and education take place in each country through taxation. No, it's through education, access to healthcare, and it is also through more international cooperation and a robust agenda to combat inequalities. However, fundamentally, that means we need a reconciliation agenda. What we are seeing in front of our eyes is, on the one hand, ongoing rhetoric to denounce things. And this, I do hear it, and it pushes us to act, but we mustn't denounce things anymore. Our predecessors denounced things previously, and they set up a group of experts. But this is just a rhetoric. And what is there apart from that? But what there is there's a degree of comfort with doing nothing, with inaction. And there, right in the middle of this, is the group that is perhaps a bit uncomfortable with what people are trying to do. No, let us build this agenda of reconciliation together and force with our public opinion, with our young people, with our businesses, with our investors, with governments of good faith, to say we have the facts, let us continue to establish the facts, and let us henceforth change our consumer habits, our production habits, our investment habits, our governmental habits, and our citizens' habits, so that collectively we can be involved in this agenda for change. But staying in this tandem of denunciation and inaction will lead to nothing. I believe very firmly that this courage to assume responsibility is to look at things straight in the face and to say what can be done immediately. We realize that some things are going to take time, because in all of our countries, there are producers who are dependent perhaps on products that aren't very good. We have also people who live in difficult areas and they have to move around, and we can't put all the blame on them. We rather need to help them to change. We need to propose solutions to them through technological innovation, through investment, by a true agenda to combat social and climate inequalities. This agenda for reconciliation is what we need. That is what I'm going to implement in France. It's what we need to implement in Europe. It's what we need to build right here. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what I wanted to share with you. I believe in this courage to assume responsibility, and more broadly, I believe in this return of courage. I do believe that we have no other choice in any case. We have to work together. Our grandmothers changed. Undoubtedly, they're a bit less, they're perhaps more complicated than previously. And they understand that there are various topics, healthcare, education, climate. Here, we're all aware that we are going to have to be accountable. But I do not believe anymore in pessimism. It's too easy. I do not believe anymore in division. I believe in our ability to propose things, to reflect, to think together, to build this agenda for reconciliation, which everywhere will enable us to find a good taste for the future as well. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the French Republic for the statement just made. May I request representatives to remain seated while we greet the head of state.